Lately, I've been trying to get into a lot of new hobbies, but I always seem to be stopped by a singular problem. I don't know how to draw. Wanting to try and tackle this common problem, I browsed through some art tutorial books available at my local library and found one that sounded good enough for what I wanted. You Can Draw in 30 Days by Mark Kistler. The only problem? My library only lets me borrow it for 14 days. Could I do it? Could I learn to draw in 14 days? Well, day 1 started and I wanted to kick it off by showing just how much of an art skill I had before this book. I wanted to draw the same thing I always have for the past few years, an anime-style portrait, this time of myself. Not great, but also not terrible. Then the book opened up by wanting me to draw a house, an airplane, and a bagel with cream cheese straight from memory, with no guidance whatsoever, and I felt a little foolish for kicking this off with my silly little portrait. The book then started off the lessons by teaching me how to draw and shade a circle, then wanting me to do the same with an apple. This introduced me to a concept that will plague the entirety of this video, and that is that I don't like the way this book teaches anything that is in a basic shape taught in kindergarten. There was no real instruction on how to draw an apple, just here's a picture of an apple, go for it. And you can tell from my own drawing that I didn't know how to break down the shape of an apple to get it looking more, well, apple-shaped. Day 2 arrived with much the same things as day 1, now multiplied. The book taught me how to draw 2 spheres, one in front of the other, then turned it into some tennis balls and focused heavily on shading. This is also where I learned that I hate blending shading, so you won't see me do that ever again. Another thing I learned is that I don't like the darker shading the book teaches you to do in between all these balls here. This is also the last time you'll see me do that. On day 3, the book told me to draw a bunch of stacked planets on a whole page, so I drew a bunch of stacked planets on a whole page. It's kind of cool, especially because the smaller circles remind me of pebbles, but overall, not that exciting. This was also the day we moved on to my love, my life, cubes. I'm not sure what it is between me and circles, but they just don't make me as happy as these cubes do. We drew a normal cube, a present, a checkered cube, a box with packaging tape on it, which I kind of messed up, but we're not going to talk about it. Don't talk to me or my cube son ever again. An open box, an open treasure chest, and a pedestal. Another thing to note is you may see all of these little dots on the corners of my drawings right now. Those are little guide dots. I could have erased them to clean up the doodles, but I decided I didn't want to, so just pretend you don't see them. The last thing I did on day 3 was this, castle? Fortress? Wood block house? I'm not really sure what it is, but I thought this was the height of coolness when I drew it. Day 4 came around and we went back to circles, unfortunately. There was a little mini lesson about how certain lines can mean certain textures, which was pretty cool as a reference, and then I was asked to draw this koala. This lesson in particular taught me the most about the author's personal drawing style, and not to be mean, but I don't like it. Personally, it's not my aesthetic, but I pushed that aside to draw this depressed koala thing like the book asked me to. Anyway, we then moved on to some cylinders, which first started with a bowl and a few flags before we moved on to a rose that doesn't really look like a rose. Listen, I understand that we're working from the ground up here and that we're showing off concepts that we can put together to create our own art pieces, but that's not a rose. Then we did a few more overlapping cylinders, a cylinder skyline, and some holes before we moved on to my love, my life, cubes again. I drew one of the best houses I've ever drawn in my life in a mailbox, and then I was done for the day. Day 5 brought yet another house drawing, this time a bit more complex than the previous, before we moved back to cylinders again. I drew this flower, then got some lessons on perspective, and how simple lines can make a cylinder look different. In particular, I really like these little kid drawings. They look like they're having a lot of fun stomping around. Day 6 brought more cylinders in the form of a massive tidal wave. Then we moved on to flags and scrolls. Shout out to the book here, which tried to make it sound like drawing scrolls was one of the best things you could do in life. In my note, I wrote over this pyramid, which is basically a love letter to cubes if I've ever read one. Speaking of, the pyramid. We've already drawn pyramids in the wooden block house a few lessons ago, but the book suddenly decided to introduce pyramids like it was a brand new concept after all this time. I do not understand the thought process of this author. Anyway, we move on to day 7 now with a volcano, thankfully not erupting, and a mug I'm not too happy with, but it's okay. The handle in particular makes me think of some medieval era tankard, and that's not quite the look I was going for, but I'm just following the lessons here, okay? It tried to teach me how to draw a tree, but failed to teach any of the core concepts of a tree. Honestly, I think this book is more of a reference on shading than anything else. The author seems to forget that this book is about teaching people how to draw and focuses a little too much on shadows for my tastes. Finally, for this day, I got to draw the inside of a room, and if I thought that wooden block fortress was the height of coolness a few days ago, it was blown out of the water by this drawing of a random hallway. I'm still quite proud of it, though it's not the best thing I drew from these lessons. Day 8 brought with it a road passing through a bunch of tall buildings, which is pretty cool to look at now, but I remember being really annoyed with it and not getting it perfectly right. I also drew this pedestal, but didn't like how slanted it was, so I tried again and made a better one. This is also the version of the pedestal where I went back to not erasing my guidelines, so you can see the amount of planning that goes into these drawings. Pretty cool, but also pretty overwhelming. The last thing I did on day 8 was draw this stack of boxes, which kind of reminds me of the Empire State Building, so that's pretty cool. On day 9, I got to draw another fortress, this time not made out of wooden blocks, and then forgot to put the date next to it. I'm not even really sure what happened here because my last date I wrote down was February 23rd, 2025, but I put this whole project away for a few months and didn't touch it until June 23rd, so yikes. Day 10, or day 130 if we include the months in between these sessions, but who's counting? I drew a city skyline. Technically speaking, the book wanted me to draw a few buildings below these, including the tops of buildings like we're looking down on them, but I thought that was really ugly and decided to stop there. I also drew this 3D high thing, but I kind of hate it, so we'll pretend it doesn't exist. The book then wanted me to trace this drawing from Da Vinci, which is really hard to do from an iPad, by the way, so I did it. It also wanted me to study the shading, but I don't love that little bridge of shadow between her cheekbone and jaw. Then it wanted me to draw a face myself with some guidelines it guided me through, and I found a new thing to hate about this book, because what the fuck is this thing? To be fair, I did mess up on the eyes and making them different sizes, but the nose, the mouth, I think the guidelines it taught were way too big for this, and this is literally my least favorite drawing of this entire book, and that's including the depressed koala and cylinder rose. Temper tantrum aside, I drew a pretty good eye next, weird that the book teaches you how to draw an entire human face before drawing an eye, and ended off the day with possibly the best drawing I've ever done in my life. My own hand. Now I will say that before this book I was already pretty weirdly good at drawing hands. I don't understand why they make sense to me, just that they do. But this hand is truly a step above the other hands I've drawn. Is it perfect? No. Is it a work of art they should put in a museum somewhere? Absolutely. And that is, believe it or not, it. All 30 lessons in this book condensed into 10 days. Before going through this challenge, I thought 14 days was pretty doable, if a little tight. So trust me when I say I'm surprised as anyone that I did this all in 10 days. I will also say that this book did teach me to draw and give me a couple of good lessons, even though I was a little mean to it and didn't appreciate it. Comparing some of my earlier drawings to my later drawings, you can definitely see a lot of progress in there. I have a few other books tucked away in a list that I want to borrow from my library, and I'm excited to see what those can teach me as well, especially if I can get some more lessons on faces and things other than depressed koalas. I'm excited to see how my artistic journey develops from here, and I hope you're excited to join me on this mini adventure. As always, thank you for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time for another video on my channel.